Hi, I'm Slayfox. Survival games have exploded over the past few years. The Steam charts are filled with all kinds of examples, including classic survival horror games and new hardcore survival sims. To help any bewildered adventurers, we've gathered together the best survival games to help you pick and choose which emergent stories and unexpected adventures to undertake. These are the top 10 best survival games to try in 2022. In today's video, I will show you the top 10 best survival games to try in 2022. Without wasting any more time, let's get into the video after the intro. Number 10. The Forest. The Forest is the place where survival and survival horror meet. It's bad enough being the sole survivor of a plane crash, stranded deep in a sinister forest. Worse still, when that forest is haunted by flesh-eating cannibal mutants who want nothing more than to eat you alive. This is a game with a serious day/night cycle, where you spend your daylight hours repairing the camp, setting traps and scavenging for food, getting ready for the nightly onslaught from the creepy cannibal hordes. They're ferocious and smart and they work together, but you can explore their settlements and take the battle back to them. The Forest is dark and genuinely scary solo, and not much easier on the nerves in co-op mode. The game features non-linear gameplay in an open-world environment played from a first-person perspective, with no set missions or quests, empowering the player to make their own decisions for survival. Following a 4-year-long early access beta phase, the game was released for Microsoft Windows in April 2018, and for the PlayStation 4 in November 2018. The game was a commercial success, selling over 5 million copies by the end of 2018. A sequel game, Sons of the Forest, is under development, and is set to be released for Microsoft Windows in October 2022. In the Forest, players control Eric LeBlanc and must survive on a forested peninsula in search of his son Timmy after a devastating plane crash. Players must survive by creating shelter, weapons, and other survival tools. Inhabiting the peninsula, along with various woodland creatures, are a tribe of cannibalistic mutants, who dwell in villages on the surface and in deep caves beneath the peninsula. While they are not necessarily always hostile to the player, their usual behavior is aggressive, especially during the night. Number 9. Raft. Those who are looking for something a little different should definitely consider loading up Raft. This survival release pits players against the islands, forcing them to begin their journey adrift at sea. When things start, players will find themselves fighting for survival from a raft, which they can then use to help them navigate to nearby islands. It's an explorative release but still quite the survival game, as players will need to outmaneuver man-eating sharks along their quest to survive. The best part is that Raft can be enjoyed solo or with a friend in an enthralling cooperative mode. Raft is an open-world survival video game developed by Swedish developer Red Beet Interactive, and published by Axolot Games. The game was released as an early access title on May 23, 2018 on Steam, after initial release as a free download on indie platform itch.io in 2016. The game was taken out of early access and its full version was released on June 20, 2022 with the release of the game's final chapter. The game is played from the first-person perspective and can be played either in the single-player or multiplayer mode. With the latter, the server is automatically provided by the game and the game takes place in co-op mode. After a world is created, the player starts on a 2x2 raft in the middle of an ocean. The player starts only with a hook that they can aim and throw to catch barrels, wood, palm fronds, plastic, crates, and other objects out of the water. The player can leave the raft and collect things while swimming, but must be careful as the raft is always moving due to the continuous ocean current. The player can also be attacked or killed by sharks that are always swimming around the raft. These sharks will also occasionally attack corners of the raft, destroying parts of it. Using a crafting system, the player can use the collected materials to assemble and research new items and to expand and improve the raft. For example, tools, weapons and nets can be manufactured. These can be used to control and guide the raft, increase the size and stability of the raft, and defend the raft from the sharks. Number 8. DayZ, the one that kicked it all off. This shuffling undead treat remains one of the best zombie games and survival games. In other words, it's the king of zombie survival games. By today's standards, DayZ could even be considered one of the leanest virtual survivors, with barely any crafting to speak of, and no objectives beyond staying alive. Food and water are vitally important, and getting sick can quickly kill you should you fail to pay attention to your symptoms. Walking without shoes cuts and infects your feet, and blood transfusions of the wrong type will see you slip away for good. If you're content with fighting against disease, bodily functions, and zombies who occasionally phase through walls, you'll get to DayZ's best feature, exploration. The world of Chernobyl is a Soviet wasteland, and Bohemia has captured that Eastern Bloc atmosphere with the towns and villages around the map. DayZ's forests feel genuinely lifelike rather than being man-made imitations, while there's a true sense of isolation out in the wilderness. DayZ's forests feel genuinely lifelike rather than being man-made imitations, while there's a true sense of isolation out in the wilderness. It's best played with a friend or two, a camping trip where things could go horribly wrong. And by horribly wrong, we mean being captured by a gang of bandits who will force feed you bleach and make off with your can opener. So yeah, proceed with extreme caution. Number 7. Ark Survival Evolved. If you're looking for a survival game that offers something new and exciting, you'll definitely want to check out Ark Survival Evolved. You'll start your adventure with absolutely nothing, and you'll need to quite literally punch trees and craft the bare necessities just to make it through the night. Those that can quickly establish a base and craft weapons to defend themselves will find a world teeming with possibilities and dinosaurs. That's right, Ark lets you hunt and tame dinosaurs, which you can then turn into your own personal pack mules. Ark is also unique in the sense that you'll go from a primitive tool-using cave person to a full-blown armored gun-wielding T-Rex rider over the course of your adventure. Ark Survival Evolved is an action-adventure survival game set in an open-world environment with a dynamic day-night cycle and played either from a third-person or first-person perspective. To survive, players must establish a base, with a fire and weapons. Additional activities, such as taming and feeding dinosaurs, require more resources. The game's world, known as the Ark, is approximately 48 square kilometers in size. There is approximately 36 square kilometers of land with 12 square kilometers of ocean. There are currently 176 creatures that populate the world of Arkansas. In the early versions of the game, nearly all creatures were real dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures. However, as the storyline progressed, mythical creatures such as the wyvern, griffin, golem, and phoenix were added. As expansions were released, completely original creatures, such as the Carcinos and the Volanosaur also made their way into the game, as well as original robotic creatures such as the Enforcer and Scout. Number 6. Rust. Possibly one of the most infamous survival games in the genre, Rust has become known for the emergent gameplay held therein. Open voice chat allows players to talk amongst themselves as though they were standing next to one another. This makes for fascinating team dynamics as people cheat, manipulate, or support one another while fending off hunger, thirst, and cold. Adding to this a highly customizable base system, flying vehicles, a randomized map, and dense weapon variety, you're left with an incredible experiment into what the genre can be at its craziest. This game is a multiplayer-only survival video game developed by Facepunch Studios. Rust was first released in early access in December 2013 and received its full release in February 2018. Rust is available on Microsoft Windows and macOS. Console versions for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One being developed in conjunction with Double 11 were released in May 2021. Rust was initially created as a clone of DayZ, a popular mod for Arma 2, with crafting elements akin to those in Minecraft. As a multiplayer-only video game, Rust pits players against each other in a harsh, open-world environment with the sole goal of survival. Animals, such as wolves and bears, act as a looming threat, but the primary danger comes from other players. Most maps are procedurally generated, with the exception of some pre-built maps. When beginning, a player only has a rock and a torch. The rock can cut down trees, break apart stones, and be used as a weapon. Cloth and food can be gathered by killing animals. Mining provides stone, metal ore, and sulfur ore, and chopping down trees provides wood. To survive in the world, the player must gather resources and use them to craft tools, weapons, and other gear. To craft items, the player must have a sufficient amount of all required materials, with advanced items needing more obscure components scattered around the map. There are limitations imposed on the amount of craftable items, with blueprints allowing the creation of more advanced items. Number 5. Days Gone. Days Gone is a third-person action-adventure game set in a post-apocalyptic open world. The player controls Deacon St. John, an outlaw-turned-drifter bounty hunter who prefers life on the road to wilderness encampments. The game takes place 2 years after a pandemic killed almost all of humanity and transformed millions of others into freakers, mindless, zombie-like creatures that evolve quickly. Swarmers, a nocturnal type of freaker, hide in their nests during daytime but often congregate, wander around, and search for food and water at night. Players can lure swarmers toward other enemies, causing the two groups to fight one another. Other enemies include newts, who are infected adolescents and opportunistic hunters who only attack Deacon when he enters their territory or has poor health. The game also includes infected wildlife and hostile human enemies. Players can be overwhelmed by hordes and must keep their distance. 4. Deacon can use firearms, melee weapons, traps, explosives, and choke points to kill freakers. This game is must try to play in 2022. The game is set in an open world in the Pacific Northwest. Players can freely explore the world on foot or using a motorcycle. The bike consumes fuel and becomes disabled if excessively damaged. Players must regularly refuel the bike at gas stations and camps, and repair it using collected scraps. Deacon must establish trust with settlement camps and earn camp credits by completing missions, and by selling bounties and food. As the level of trust increases, players can purchase new weapons, supplies and motorcycle parts that can be used to enhance its speed, durability and maneuverability. The bike's appearance can also be customized. Number 4. Dying Light 1 and 2. Many of the survival games on this list feature subtle sidetrack storylines that can be completed at the player's leisure. Dying Light is very much the same, but it has a much wider and deeper story than most survival releases. You're free to explore the open world and collect supplies and weapons as you see fit, completing the array of side quests that can be found littered throughout the expansive cityscape. Yet, when you want to engross yourself in the storyline, you'll find a wonderfully executed tale of struggle and hardship during a post-apocalyptic zombie outbreak. Dying Light 2 Stay Human is a 2022 survival horror game developed and published by Techland. The sequel to Dying Light, 2015, the game was released on February 4, 2022 for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X/S. A Nintendo Switch version for the cloud is currently in development. The game received generally favorable reviews, with praise directed at the combat, parkour system, and open world, but criticism for the story. It sold 5 million units in its first month of release. Dying Light 2 Stay Human is an action role-playing survival horror game featuring a zombie apocalyptic-themed open world. Set 22 years after Dying Light, it stars a new protagonist named Aiden Caldwell, who is equipped with various parkour skills. Players can perform actions such as climbing ledges, sliding, leaping off from edges, and wall running to quickly navigate the city. It was confirmed that there are over 3,000 parkour animations to give a more fluid free running experience. Tools such as a grappling hook and a paraglider also aid traversal in the city. Aiden can also use the undead to break his fall. The game is mostly melee-based, with the majority of fighting using melee weapons. The melee weapons have a limited lifespan and will degrade as the player uses them in combat. Long-range weapons such as crossbows, shotguns, and spears can be used as well. Weapons can be upgraded with different blueprints and components which can be found by breaking down weapons for craft parts. Aiden can also utilize superhuman skills due to the infection. New zombies have been added. Like the first game, the zombies are slow when exposed to sunlight, but they become more aggressive and hostile at night. During the latter time of day, players can avoid zombies roaming the streets by staying on rooftops, who would otherwise hibernate inside buildings to avoid sunlight, or explore the safe interior of buildings to find items. Number 3. State of Decay 1 and 2. Zombies seem to be the subject of a lot of survival games, which is fine since most of us enjoy the thrill of escaping ravenous hordes of the undead. There is something quite electric about being surrounded by so much danger. State of Decay puts you in the driver's seat when it comes to post-apocalyptic planning and survival. The title is a mixture of traditional scavenging and world building, where you'll need to establish a base and keep as many survivors safe as you can. After all, there's strength in numbers. State of Decay 2 is a survival video game developed by Undead Labs and published by Xbox Game Studios. The game is a follow-up to State of Decay and was released for Microsoft Windows and Xbox One on May 22, 2018. Like its predecessor, players are required to build a community, manage resources and survive against the horde of zombies. State of Decay 2 is a zombie survival game, with an emphasis on scavenging for items, in which gameplay is experienced from a third-person view. The game is set in an open-world environment and features cooperative gameplay with up to 3 other players. The player can choose from several locations to build a base, then reinforce and improve it with various facilities like watchtowers, gardens, sleeping quarters, kitchens, workshops, medical bays, etc. to help keep survivors safe and healthy. Part of the game is balancing the use of resources, food, medicine, ammo, and construction materials. They can be obtained by scavenging or trading with NPCs. The player can interact with survivors outside of their group, trading with them, helping them or recruiting them. Only one survivor can be controlled at a time, though the player can ask an AI-controlled survivor to accompany them, and in certain missions, one or more AI-controlled survivors will accompany the player. Cooperative multiplayer is also available, allowing players to recruit a friend to temporarily join their game to assist them with objectives.
Number 2. Subnautica Below Zero. We'll be honest, one of the things that absolutely terrifies us is the depth of the ocean. Much like space, there are areas and channels within the deepest waters that are untouched by man, untamable and even unexplorable. Fear of the unknown is a very real thing, and the ocean presents it in spades. Subnautica plays on these fears by forcing its players to survive in a vast aquatic world. On the outside, this seems like a happy-go-lucky diving adventure, but veterans of this world will attest that this release is much more like a survival horror. This game is a survival adventure, set in an open-world environment and played from a first-person perspective. Like its predecessor, the player's goal is to explore the environments and survive in an alien environment while also completing objectives to advance the game's plot. Players collect resources, construct tools, build bases and submersibles, and can interact with the planet's wildlife. To survive and complete objectives, player must collect raw materials from the environment and craft equipment, vehicles, shelters, and food. Each of these has its own recipe, and some ingredients can only be found in the far-flung and deeper corners of the game world. Habitat structures provide shelter, storage for equipment and collected materials, and crafting stations. Inside a habitat, the player can also craft living amenities such as beds or coffee tables, although these are purely cosmetic since the game does not track fatigue. Number 1. No Man's Sky. Cue the thunderous wave of boos and hisses. All joking aside, there was definitely a time in which No Man's Sky was the absolute laughingstock of the entire gaming world. It was the prime example of why players shouldn't fall too deeply into the Kickstarter craze, and there is absolutely no denying that the game failed big time to deliver all of its promises to a wide-eyed and hopeful fanbase. But you really have to admire the developers for hanging in there and taking all of the well-deserved criticism and backlash in stride. Fast forward to now, and No Man's Sky is a shadow of its former self. It's a much, much better release now and can be an absolute blast to play with friends. It's still not the game we were all promised, but it's definitely one of the more unique options out there, and is absolutely beautiful to boot. No Man's Sky is an action-adventure survival game played from a first- or third-person perspective that allows players to engage in 4 principal activities: exploration, survival, combat, and trading. The player takes the role of a specimen of alien humanoid planetary explorer, known in-game as the Traveler, in an uncharted universe. They start on a randomized planet near a crashed spacecraft towards the edge of the galaxy, and are equipped with the survival exosuit with a jetpack and a multi-tool that can be used to scan, mine and collect resources, as well as to attack or defend oneself from creatures and hostile forces. The player can collect, repair, and refuel the craft, allowing them to travel about the planet, between other planets and space stations in the local planetary system, engage in space combat with alien factions, or make hyperspace jumps to other star systems. While the game is open-ended, the player may follow the guidance of the entity known as the Idlis to head towards the center of the galaxy. Thank you for watching. If you have any survival games in your mind, let me know in the comments. Make sure to like the video if it was useful, and do subscribe if you're new to my channel. Hope you all have a good day. I will see you in the next video.